this is like the right-wing accounts and their anger and resentment with the likes of the ADL, which is, why is the ADL so anti-white? Like, we want to be on board. You guys are doing, we love that. We want to do, we are doing, but why can't you let us do some as well? Let's start off with some good news, some interesting news. The largest educators union just voted to cut ties with the Tide Defense League. That's right. Educators Union rejects Anti-Defamation League and cuts ties. The Anti-Defamation League has been a ubiquitous presence in U.S. schools for 40 years, pushing curriculum, direct programming, and teacher training into K through 12 schools and increasingly into universities, often over the objections of students, parents, and educators. Now, the 3 million member National Education Association, the largest coalition of unions, like technically it's an umbrella organization that comprises of numerous teachers unions. So it's the largest union in the nation, is officially cutting ties with the ADL. In the July 6th vote, the NEA's 7,000 member representative assembly cut all ties with the ADL. The body approved a measure that the NEA will not use, endorse, or publicize materials from the Anti-Defamation League, such as its curricular materials or statistics. The reasoning: despite its reputation as a civil rights organization, the ADL is not the social justice educational partner it claims to be. This is the truth. Okay? This is the truth. It is not. It bills itself as a civil rights organization. The ADL bills itself as a civil rights organization. But it has actually never been a true civil rights organization, and the only real civil rights and anti-bigotry initiatives that they engage with, they have done to either directly use anti-Semitism as a weapon against critics of Israel, or the other types of like actual database research that they do, they use to legitimize themselves as a civil rights organization. So at the point where it actually matters, they will then defend the nation state of Israel. An apartheid state, mind you, an apartheid state that is considered an apartheid state by virtually every human rights organization on the planet, including the ICJ, including the United Nations at this point. Every single instrument of justice, every single international human rights organization has openly declared Israel what it actually is, an apartheid state. And if this quote-unquote civil rights organization's sole purpose is to defend this Jewish ethno-religious regime that is currently conducting a campaign in broad daylight, a live-stream child holocaust, it is understandable that reputable institutions, specifically involved in educating the youth, educating the next generation, would want nothing to do with that. That makes total fucking sense. I'm shocked that it took this long, but I'm glad, and I will take this. Okay? Naturally, the ADL responded with accusing the NEA of, you guessed it, anti-Semitism. It is now anti-Semitic to just simply not want to work with the ADL. Must have missed that in the IHRA speech guidelines. The ADL is horrible for lots of reasons, but just to add one more that gets overlooked, when you actually patch together its previous statements, Greenblatt's criteria for acceptable Palestine advocacy that doesn't constitute anti-Semitism is literally just protesting Hamas. According to Greenblatt, a Palestinian born in Jerusalem, living in a home that's been in his family for generations, denying that said home is the Jewish homeland is per se racism. Seriously, you can ask him. He'll evade the details, but eventually he'll say a version of this. Under the ADL's rubric, that opposition to Zionist ideology is per se a form of racial hatred. Palestinians' mere existence and refusal to accept third-class status in their place of birth is in and of itself a form of prejudice. I'm not sure this makes a lot of sense. Using the word Holocaust to attack what Israel is doing, well, brother, you might be late to the game, but I think you need to catch up. What Israel is doing is a live, modern version of the Holocaust. What Israel is doing to the Palestinians is a live-streamed Holocaust, primarily of children, women and children. Okay? Zionism is a racist fascist ideology. It is an ethno-religious supremacist ideology that requires the of the indigenous population, the constant othering and dehumanization of all Palestinians, Christian and Muslim alike, and all Arabs in general. It's a monolithization of all Arabs in the region, and a constant othering and constant expansion of this outgroup. Okay? Yes. Welcome to the fucking real world. Many more people are finally coming to this recognition. There is no more of this like, well, this is unique. How dare you compare it to what the Jewish people are doing, what the Jewish state is doing? It doesn't work that way. It was never a sincere way to deflect criticism away, but it certainly is not one that actually reaches it's certainly not one that reaches the masses any longer. Okay? It's also funny to come in here to my community and present this as a naysayer, because this is a place where I have consistently advocated for Palestinian emancipation and have been unyielding in spite of the numerous attacks to both my character, to my bottom line, to my community, to my friends. And yet I have never shied away from saying the truth, and have been always consistent on this. Okay? Not only that, but also, for the first time in my lifetime, I am actually watching the broader public sentiment shift in my direction as well, in real time. Roger Waters, Pink Floyd's super cool frontman, of course, is in support of Palestine Action. In the UK, Palestine Action recently was prescribed as a terrorist organization akin to ISIS. So if you are like an 80-year-old woman, 83-year-old teacher or a nurse, and you came out in support of Palestine Action, you can be imprisoned for approximately 14 years, as though you have openly and actively defended ISIS. No such litigation exists, of course, for those who have conducted by going in and working with a foreign military, the Israeli military, and engaged in heinous actions. You can be a British citizen that goes to Israel, joins the Israeli occupying forces, kills a bunch of children, and then you can freely come back to the UK without even an ounce of scrutiny. But God forbid you actually support people, even with your words, that are engaging in direct action against the British state for its complicity in these genocidal that Israel is committing, that the UK is also committing. Then you go to prison, potentially for 14 years. It is completely unacceptable. It is ridiculous. And people are not putting up with this anymore. The suffragettes literally planted bombs. UK Parliament doing a ceremony to honor them right before banning Palestine Action. Yeah. This is how it's always been, though. The powerful institutions will first avoid you, deny you, will ridicule you, okay? Then they'll prosecute you to try and stop you. And then when you're still an undeniable force, especially because you have that moral clarity, okay, eventually they recognize you and history remembers you as a heroic figure that did the right thing. That's it. And given the accelerated time frame of action and reaction nowadays, where things rapidly move through the media cycle and are instantly consumed, the time frame for going from a villain in society to a heroic figure is getting shorter as well. So you can actually experience that in your own lifetime. It's crazy. So if you are pro-Palestine, you have moral clarity and you have popular support. And that is why I have always stated, no matter how horrible things look, no matter how many hurdles governments might put in front of you, your cause is just, and you should always keep up the pressure, and eventually we will be able to move and change society. You can never give up on maintaining revolutionary optimism. You cannot succumb to nihilism for a million different reasons, but especially spite. If you can't find any real reason to stop yourself from succumbing to nihilism, think about your enemies. They want you to be nihilistic. They want you to give up, okay? Let's say you're suicidal. Are you really going to end your life before you experience the end of the Israeli apartheid? Really? Can't do that. You can't surrender. Never kill yourself. We have a job. We have a goal. We have a mission. You cannot let the apartheid state of Israel outlive you. Okay? That's one way to look at it. I would have succumbed to nihilism so long ago if it weren't for you and your commentary. No joke, no lie. Good. That's what I try to do. Okay, so getting back into it. Yeah, Roger Waters is, of course, a notorious critic of Israel, a notorious anti-fascist, and therefore the Apartheid Defense League hates him. A lot of Jewish advocacy groups that claim to defend Jews and claim to attack anti-Semites, but simply use all of that space to criticize those who dare become critics of the state of Israel, hate Roger Waters. His intentional support of Palestine, actually prescribed as a terrorist organization in the UK, is just the latest example of Waters' long history of anti-Semitic and anti-Israel rhetoric. Read more about Waters here. I'm not going to do that, obviously. Fuck the ADL. Allowing the ADL to determine what constitutes anti-Semitism would be like allowing the fossil fuel industry to determine what constitutes climate change, said NEA delegate Steven Siegel from the assembly floor. Amazing things are happening. Okay? Amazing things are happening. I went on a date with an Israeli guy once, and he basically spent the whole time ranting about how Roger Waters was basically Hitler too. It's so funny because, like, Israel is a right-wing project. It's a right-wing institution. So, if you were to remove, like, the real anti-Semitism from the equation for a moment, because that is a cynical shield that many Israel defenders apply willingly, like, it's no different than white Christian guys constantly talking about there's a war against Christmas. Okay? Like, it's not any different than perceived victimhood, like endless perceived victimhood and constant fucking crying and whining and then demanding that you get fired from your fucking job. That's all this is. It's crazy that Free Palestine is like a slur to them. Oh, I've seen this video many times. This is like the IDF model chick, right?
My name is Eden Dagan. Check it. And I'm from Israel. I'm a model. If you know, you know. Hey, don't touch.
Free Palestine.
Free Palestine. Oh, I am a model from Israel. No politic here. Don't touch. This is my microphone. This is like the right-wing accounts and their anger and resentment with the likes of the ADL, which is, why is the ADL so anti-white? Like, we want to be on board. You guys are doing fascism. We love that. We want to do fascism. We are doing fascism. But why can't you let us do some fascism as well? And in a way, it's kind of honest. It's like the Richard Spencer style of support for Israel, where Richard Spencer, open neo-Nazi, as you guys know, prominent white nationalist, Richard Spencer, is actually an Israel supporter. And he routinely says, like, I like Israel because I want to do what Israel's doing, but for white people here in America. So here is the intellectually consistent fascists over at Visegrad 24 demanding answers.
It's a wonderful saying that goes, for as long as the Jews have kept the Sabbath has kept the Jews.
Yeah.
They've managed to retain a respect for their traditions and values. Even the unreligious Jews have a broad respect for. They've managed to have, especially, well, in Israel, Israel is the only Western country with an above a replacement level demographic rate.
Dude, he's literally talking about Israel's fascism, like, straight up. He is an ally to Israel in the most earnest, most honest way possible, okay? Because he is a fucking little Nazi freak. So he's like, yeah, you guys have been able to keep your ethnic demographic profile consistent. Like, he is describing Israel as an ethno-state and Israel's ethno-state project as a positive, and literally, Jonathan Greenblatt, who is supposed to be a fucking civil rights administrator, okay? Remember, the Apartheid Defense League bills itself as a civil rights organization, is talking to this fucking racist freak about Israel's demographic projects as its maintenance of this ethno state, and humming along and going, yeah, it's true.
They've been very good at having strong borders. They've stuck together.
Was the ADL always like this? Yes, the ADL was always like this. They literally got popped spying on Jews that were against the South African apartheid in the 90s, or I think in the 80s. Not in the 90s, sorry. They were spying on anti-apartheid activists who were Jewish, okay? Jewish anti-apartheid activists, and obviously like black civil rights groups and organizations that were anti-South African apartheid. They were doing that in the fucking 80s, dude. It's insane. They did like infiltration of these groups. It is psychotic.
Right? And the fact of sticking together, the reason that they managed to survive without a state for so long is because they have stuck together. If, for example, there is a group of white Americans who wants to put the interests of white Americans first and says, okay, we are a group that is currently smaller and smaller as a percentage of the entire United States, and the demographics are shifting.
Dude, that's awesome. I love this, okay? I love this. They spied on Mark Ames from Radio War Nerd. He's Jewish and was involved in activism in college. Yeah, I remember him talking. I think he talked to the Chapo Boys about that. But like, I've read some of the reports on the Apartheid Defense League, like straight up. You know, I've covered it on the broadcast before. I didn't even know Mark Ames personally was spied on until the Chapo episode. ADL, Trump's comments misinterpreted, not anti-Semitic. Oh, this was when Trump was like, Jews are magic money people. This is, again, the ADL has one route only. They're like, are you pro-Israel? Okay, then you can say whatever the fuck you want. And we'll still... Guys, the American evangelical Zionist movement is incredibly prominent, okay? It is an incredibly important vehicle of fundraising and an incredibly important line of defense for Israel and Israel's interests. A lot of people don't even consider this. They don't even think about this because most people are like, oh, that's like a Jew thing. Like Israel's just like a Jewish project. That's what it is. Like all Jews, or they only care about Israel. It's like, no, there's motherfuckers out there who are deeply anti-Semitic who literally will ride for Israel way harder than the average Jewish person, okay? You have to remember that. Why am I talking about this? Because there is an evangelical pastor whose name is John Hagee, okay? He is one of the most prominent pro-Israel defenders. He's a Christians United for Israel guy, Kufi. And John Hagee is famous, okay? John Hagee, this televangelist who is an evangelical Zionist, is famous for saying Hitler was the Antichrist that was also Jewish and a gift for the Jews because he did the Holocaust, and therefore the Israeli nation-state project could be launched. Okay? Like, that is the maximum anti-Semitic point that you could bring up. That is what Nazis say. But in a negative. Nazis will say that, and then will say that it's like, you know, it's a bad thing. He's just simply saying it's a good thing. Would you be surprised to find out that Pastor John Hagee went to the pro-Israel rally and spoke in front of all of these, in front of these major pro-Israeli crowds in Washington, D.C., sandwiched between important figures in the pro-Israel movement, such as Van Jones and also Chuck Schumer? Would you be surprised if I were to tell you that these guys who constantly yell at you about anti-Semitism rising in the country actually have no problem with someone who is a deep and rabid, open, overt anti-Semite like Pastor John Hagee, but because he's pro-Israel and a major booster of Israel, they don't give a fuck about how anti-Semitic he gets? I believe Hakeem Jeffries might have also been there as well. Nope, no such criticisms of the ADL. No such criticisms from Van Jones. No such criticisms about anti-Semitism about one of their fellow speakers at the pro-Israel rally in Washington, D.C., only months after Israel started its genocidal campaign in Gaza. So just remember, when these motherfuckers talk about anti-Semitism, they don't actually care about anti-Semitism. They only care about anti-Israel sentiment. The only times when they even remotely cover like real civil rights issues is because they want to create an environment of seriousness around themselves. They want to be a credible advocate so that they can use that credibility when it matters the most against critics of Israel. Okay? Amid record fundraising, ADL lays off staff to consolidate focus on anti-Semitism. We talked about this already. They dismissed 22 workers this week because this was in June 26th, 2025. Why did they lay off people? Why did they lay off people? That's because all of those people were either A, incredibly critical of ADL's like unimaginable Israel support, because like there were people that worked there in the staff that were there to be like, I'm here to combat real anti-Semitism. I'm here to combat real bigotry, right? Because it's billed itself as a fucking a real civil rights advocacy group. Okay, so there were a bunch of staffers that kept freaking out at Jonathan Greenblatt for the way that Jonathan Greenblatt has like overtly used this organization, the civil rights organization, to defend the apartheid state. Okay? So then Jonathan Greenblatt literally fired the employees at a time of record fundraising for the ADL. He fired the employees that were tasked with looking at other forms of bigotry to basically whip up the ranks so that they can exclusively focus on critics of Israel. That's it, and nothing else. Yeah. Here you go. Beautiful bipartisanship. Mike Johnson, Chuck Schumer, and Hakeem Jeffries and Joni Ernst holding hands while chanting, "We stand with Israel." Look at that. How crazy. Isn't it wonderful? Isn't it wonderful that we could get isn't it wonderful that we could get all of our politicians together to unify under one issue, though? Until you started talking about the ADL, I always assumed they were similar to the ACLU because that's how they are portrayed in the media. Yeah, it's a major lie. It's the biggest lie. It's a total fucking lie. The ADL is nothing like the ACLU. And yeah, this is from January 5th, 2024. Anti-Defamation League staff decried dishonest campaign against Israel's critics. ADL has only doubled down on initiatives defending Israel and the policies of the Israeli government amid criticism and staff resignations. They already had a shit ton of staffers resign over their frustration with what Jonathan Greenblatt was doing, which is ironic because like that is the primary focus of the Apartheid Defense League. Anyway, getting back to this, getting back to these two Nazis talking to one another, let's take a look at what this Polish Nazi openly being like, why won't you let whites have an ethno-state? You Jews get an ethno-state and you defend it. And I love that for you. Can we just get the whites to also have an ethno-state, please?
Is that something that is problematic?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I think, look, the fact of the matter is I have no problem with anyone having pride in who they are and what they believe and their values, to the extent that those beliefs and those values don't infringe upon me and don't encroach on my ability to lead a full, life based on, again, my values and beliefs. So I think typically the organizations who espouse a kind of white nationalism tend to have a view that's quite, let's just say, negative toward non-white people. I think there's lots of examples of that.
Let me bounce back on that.
No, he like this right here is a perfect, like this guy is the perfect guy despite despite his limitations. He's the perfect guy to call him out on this because he's like, why can't whites have an ethno-state? Like, you are a Nazi and that's a good thing. Why can't whites also do Nazi stuff, which I also believe is a good thing, is what he's saying, okay? That's literally what he's saying here. He's like, this is the Richard Spencer line. Like, he's trying to get him to come to terms with, like, allowing neo-Nazis more breathing room to operate. And it's funny that Jonathan Greenblatt's honest answer here is like, well, they don't really like me. Like, if neo-Nazis drop the anti-Semitism stuff, or more importantly, the anti-Israel stuff, I suspect Jonathan Greenblatt would not have any issues with them any longer. As long as they're still hating on black people alone, and only black people, or only fucking brown people, especially Palestinians, fairly certain Jonathan Greenblatt would be perfectly fine and wouldn't, like, try to actively campaign on deplatforming them. Now, of course, given Jonathan Greenblatt's fantastic work in the field of censoring all of Israel's critics with false accusations of anti-Semitism, he's actually lost a lot of his institutional power and institutional prowess. And therefore, it doesn't even work anymore. I'm living, breathing proof of this. Like, I don't want to test it, and I don't want to, like, agitate him any further and have him, like, hyper-focus on me even more. But the reality of the matter is, the cat's out of the fucking bag. People, understandably, for very good reason, hate Israel, okay? For very good reason. I mean, perhaps the greatest reason. Genocide is the best reason to despise a country, okay, and its actions, a government and its actions. And if the people are defending said genocide, even being critical of the people is valid, okay? Cat's out of the fucking bag. And no matter how much you try to censor honest critics of the Israeli apartheid regime, it still does not change the reality on the ground. It does not change people's perception of said reality on the ground. It is too late, okay? Especially with the internet, it is virtually impossible for people to continue maintaining this, like, censorship regime. What are you going to do? Stop me from going on the fucking Morning Joe? Okay, who cares? You know what I mean? And I'm willing to bet that CNN, MSNBC, and all of these other fucking outlets that the ADL has a little bit of flex at, okay, where they can just, like, go and defame someone like myself with no pushback whatsoever. Like, good luck. You know, I'm willing to bet that they would much rather have me than Jonathan Greenblatt on their regular programming. And even then, I can live without going on these outlets, and so it's also perfectly fine. Okay, so even if they were successful at, like, deplatforming initiatives, that would still be perfectly fine. Someone said AT&T Pepela. Yeah, like, AT&T is a great example of this. They have, like, a fucking hard-on for me. They just, like, don't fuck with me at all. Oh, no. You know what I mean? Like, what? Oh, no. Oh, well. What will I do without this incredibly corrupt major fucking corporation? Like, it's not like I was going to get their advertising dollars anytime soon. But even if they were to just, like, enforce some kind of, like, weird censorship, like, on content creators that they sponsor, who gives a shit? They deplatform you, 10 more might start doing it. It doesn't matter. My point is, it doesn't matter. I am one person, okay? I am one singular individual. I have not hypnotized people into understanding the truth about what Israel is doing, okay? I don't have the power of mind control. So if your goal is to change public sentiment, coming after someone like myself and maybe even successfully deplatforming me, or even fucking arresting me, jailing me, making sure that I can never have a voice ever again, is not going to change the reality, okay? That is my point. That is my argument. You can just be like, oh, dude, I don't really like that this guy says a lot about Israel. He talks a lot about Israel, and he's very critical of Israel. And I think that that this is, like, very frustrating for me. Okay. Let's say it's successful. Let's say if the deplatforming initiatives worked, okay? There are 1,000 other people who also will continue doing this advocacy. And not only are there 1,000 other people who will continue doing the advocacy, okay? There are tens of millions all around the world who already recognize the truth. It's not something you can shelter the rest of the public from at this point. You can't do it. When you see hundreds of thousands of people take to the goddamn streets, okay? When you see 83-year-olds getting arrested for defending Palestine action in the UK, and you got police officers packing them up and trying to prosecute them for being in support of a prescribed terrorist organization. When you got 83-year-olds getting arrested, it's over. It's done. And the only thing that this will do is breed more enmity, breed more resentment. Because when people are censored for saying the truth, when people are actively pursued and even prosecuted for speaking the truth about a fucking foreign nation state, that makes them even angrier. that makes them more resentful, understandably. It doesn't cause them to go, you know what? I'm no longer going to fucking talk. I'm no longer going to speak out on this. There was a point in time where people were afraid. That was the month of October, 2023. Okay? And every single day since then, as Israel continued its death and destruction of all Palestinian lives in the Gaza Strip, and did it in this immensely arrogant way, and did it in broad daylight, constantly demanding fealty. Every single day, there were another 100,000 people who recognized that this was unsustainable, that this was horrifying, that this was completely unacceptable. Okay? That's it. That's it.
I don't think the Jews have a negative attitude towards non-Jews, even though they put their own interests first. Do you see that it doesn't? It's not necessarily exclusionary, right? You can put the interest of the group first and say, the reason I bring this up, I'm half Polish. I live in Poland. Half Polish. I spend most of my life in Poland. I'm a proponent of strong borders for a variety of reasons. And one of those reasons is I don't necessarily want to see the demographic fabric of my country change. I would like the people who come to be people who respect my country, who want to speak the language of that country and want to partake in that broader society. I don't think that mass migration will necessarily help retain those things.
I don't know if that's a white policy.
No, that's
I don't know what that...
It's not a white policy. It's just a policy.
Yeah. No. The Great Replacement Theory is famously not an anti-Semitic canard. Yeah. No, that's totally fine. Jonathan Greenblatt here. What is he sitting in defense of like perhaps one of the most classic neo-Nazi tropes of all time? Amazing. What good is what is your purpose, dog? You got a dude straight up talking about how we must maintain the purity of whites, like to your face. And you can't even fucking push back against that? That's crazy.
Of putting my country and my people first. Look, my people happen to be 99% white, right?
Right, but like, so you could have that, I mean, Japan for centuries